All right, on this special topics in bloodstain pattern analysis series, today we're going to break down a pattern that's located on the floor. So as we've always mentioned, that this disclaimer that looking at this particular presentation as well as other presentations in this series isn't sufficient to make you an analyst or competent. You need to find a mentor to help guide you through the specific aspects of BPA. All right, so this is an overview of the pattern that's on the floor. We can kind of get a general sense of a size as well as some other blood stains that are present on the floor. We can see a linear stain that's on the lower portion of the slide. That is not going to be the focus. The focus is going to be this larger shape stain that's towards the top. Now, as we look at this particular stain, there's one thing of note, and this is on the left-hand side of this particular image. On the left-hand side of the image, we have an area of damage. There's not really much that we can say about this particular area of damage other than it is linear. We can give some dimensions to it. It's about 2 inches long. But besides that, it's just going to be a linear defect in the floor. Looking back now at the pattern, we're going to look at our descriptors as far as location, size, shape, distribution, and appearance. As far as location, we know that this is on a floor, so we've got a horizontal surface. Other aspects of the location are going to be the features of the target surface. Here we've just got white cardboard. As far as the size, we have one primary stain. This primary stain is about 2.5 inches wide by about 3 inches long. It is irregular in shape. Some aspects it looks rectangular, but it's kind of got a curved side on the left. So this is going to be rectangular to irregular shape. And as far as the distribution, we'll get to the distribution of the small elliptical stains that are on the right side later on. As far as the appearance, this is where we describe the edge characteristics as well as the coloration and any other features within the pattern. For the appearance of this, when we look at the edges, most of the edges are generally well defined. We can see where the blood stain stops and where it starts. We've got at the top a very sharp linear edge. We can kind of get a sharp edge also on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is more of a curved shape, and the bottom side of the stain is kind of irregular in shape. When we look at the internal coloration of the blood, we have an inconsistent internal coloration of the blood. It's not the same color. We've got some heavy areas as well as some darker areas. Now what I'd like to do though now is look at the edge characteristics on the right hand side of this pattern, because we have some interesting features that are going to help us when we come to the classification. As we zoom in on the right hand side, we actually see that we have a potential area of damage that's also present within this, so we'll take note of that. There are two particular features I want to look at. The first is going to be denoted in this yellow box. In this yellow box, we have some streaks or some spines that are extending outward from this edge, and they are, I wouldn't say they're in a radiating distribution. They all seem to be somewhat parallel to each other, but we certainly have some streaks that are extending outward from this edge. As we look lower in the image, we are going to focus on these circular to elliptical shaped stains. They're heaviest here within the blue square, but as we look upward, we can see that they're also above this blue square in the same area as the yellow square as well. These stains, although we don't have a scale, are going to be in the range of 1 millimeter to maybe 2 millimeters max in width. Most of them are going to be less than 1 millimeter wide. They are generally circular in shape. We can't really see any clear distribution. I wouldn't say that they have a radiating distribution. When it comes to the size, it appears that the larger ones are generally closer to this larger parent stain. As we move further away, they generally get smaller. It's kind of difficult to see, but it appears that the distance between the stains also gets smaller as we move away. However, one of the things that isn't particularly clear is whether or not there is a change in the degree of ellipse as we move further away from this parent stain or closer to the parent stain. Most of these stains appear to be circular in shape. So we get to classification, and so essentially answering what mechanism created this particular stain. And this is where we're going to use the damage on the floor off to the left. That's going to help us in our classification. When we look at the parent stain, this irregular shape parent stain with this uneven internal blood coloration, those are all pretty characteristic of transfer stains. But there's more than what's going on here. And that's where we're looking at those streaks that are extending outward. Those streaks extending outward, when we understand fluid dynamics, those are dealing with a level of force that is greater than what we typically see with a transfer stain if something lightly touches the surface. So what we have here then is probably an impact pattern that's associated with this transfer. And what that, if you think of the definition of an impact pattern, is where a blood source is struck and causing blood to go airborne. And when we typically think of the impact patterns, we think of the droplets that are released and go airborne from the original blood source. Here we have the original blood source. It strikes the floor, causing these streaks to come outward. So that's going to tell us that we have an impact event that's going on. Now, what about the circular to elliptical stains? Those could be associated with an impact, but we also have damage that's nearby. And for me, whenever I have a transfer stain as well as circular to elliptical stains with adjacent to damage, one of the things that I have to consider is the possibility that we have a cessation pattern. So there are three potential patterns that are here: a transfer, an impact, and a cessation mechanism. In reality, that's what happened here. We have an object that I threw onto the floor that had blood on it. It struck the floor, so there's your transfer. And because the bloody portion of this object also hit the floor, that created the impact. And because we have an object that's in motion that abruptly stops, it also creates these spatter stains that are associated with the cessation event. So it's a very complex pattern. It's a small pattern, but there's a lot that's going on here. Now, an obvious question may be, what was the object that I threw down onto the floor? And even though I know what the object is, there's not enough information within this particular pattern to link it to a specific object to any degree of confidence. My general approach to transfer stains is I do not link them to specific object based on general geometric shapes alone. There has to be some fine features within that pattern in order for me to link it to something. And here all we have is a rectangular-ish to irregular shaped transfer stain, and that's about it. So I'm not going to link this to any particular item. It ended up being a hatchet, and once you know that it's a hatchet, you can kind of see the hatchet there, especially in that arched line below. But if you didn't know the ground truth, there's really not enough information within this transfer stain to link it to a hatchet. So for me, this would simply be a hatchet, or this would simply be a transfer stain created by an object that was in motion and it struck the floor. So I hope you enjoyed this particular breakdown of this pattern on the floor. Keep watching for other videos within this series. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I've got my email address on the bottom of all these slides. Thank you again.